are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me, as always, Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, we're kind of creeping towards Christmas here, and quite frankly, the Flyers have given us the best gift of all. We'll be diving into a pretty good week where the Flyers did indeed go 3-0. But before we do that, make sure to follow us on social media at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. But yeah, just jumping straight into it here. It's going to be a little bit of a quick show today. But we do have some good things to talk about. The Flyers went 3-0. So I texted the group chat last night, and I was mostly kidding, to be honest. But I said are the Flyers elite? Now, I don't. Like I said, mostly kidding.
Right.
But they're 3-0
this week.
They just handled the Colorado Avalanche, who are a good team. They beat the Pittsburgh Penguins again this week, who, again, the Penguins have turned it around from a rough start and are a reasonable team at this point in time. Have been one of the hotter teams, honestly, because of how slow they started. So the fact that you got 2 wins over them in the last week and a bit, you did also beat Arizona, who's floating around that Western Conference playoff race. The Flyers are not just winning games. The Flyers are beating quality teams.
Right. And I'm laughing because of the fact that as I'm watching Saturday's game against Colorado play out, I could already hear you at the beginning of this show. I already could hear where it was going because I know what happened the last time they went on a little bit of a winning streak. And we sat there and we're like, guess how far away it is from Thanksgiving. And it's, what are we supposed to say when Thanksgiving hits and they're in a playoff spot, right? What are we supposed to say? That was 2.5, 3 weeks ago, though.
Yep.
And, so what happens now?
Well, right. Because as we sit here today, we are recording this on Sunday morning, December 10th. And the Flyers are in second place in the Metro. And
much, I think still, right? Because that's where they were the last time we had this kind of conversation.
And by themselves, too. Like, nobody else has 31 points.
Right. I mean,
and then, just looking across the league here, the Flyers have 15 wins, which is as many as the Dallas Stars, and more than the Toronto Maple Leafs, more than the Detroit Red Wings, more than the Tampa Bay Lightning, more than the Washington Capitals, more than the New Jersey Devils, more than the Carolina Hurricanes, more than that Arizona team we just talked about. They have they've won a lot of games.
Yeah, and I do think
and that is just straight W's. That's not points.
Right. And I thought about that today because how many times have we had the conversation about how they're, and I'm not talking about this year or last or anything like that, but when we would have the conversation of they're in the playoff picture or they're close to it, and we would look and then at the end of the day go, oh yeah, it's because they lost 10 times in overtime in a shootout and they got the loser point 10 times. So it clouds how well they've actually played. They've lost and they're hanging. They've had 2 of those. Like, you've played 27 games. You've had 2 of them. You at one point in time, because I think it didn't happen this week. This happened last week because they beat Pittsburgh the first time in a shootout. And when they beat Pittsburgh for the first time out of the 2 in a shootout, and it was their second shootout win in 2 tries, back-to-back weekends. We're sitting there going, oh, so now they're a good shootout team, And then now you have to throw in now that they're a good overtime team. Yeah, they lost one of these recently to the Devils, but they've won 2 of them at least against two overtime games against Vegas and Pittsburgh.
Something is topsy-turvy about this season because what else have the Flyers historically struggled with?
Penalty kill.
What is their best unit on the team currently? The penalty kill. Something weird is going on. And are the Flyers elite was a joke. But Kevin, are the Flyers for real? Are the Flyers an actual hockey team? Like potentially looking to make the playoffs, or at the very least maybe add at the deadline?
Add at the deadline. No.
Is it time to start having that conversation?
Sure, because I think it's been brought up a couple of times. That's why, Danny Briere was on the pregame show on NBC Sports Philadelphia before Saturday's game. And that question it's going to come up for the rest until we get there. I mean,
winning.
We're talking about at this point, once,
if they lose six of the next 7, the conversation kind of stops and we go, okay, this is who they are.
Sure.
But as long as they keep winning, I mean, they're going to keep asking.
You've got 2.5 months until realistically speaking, I know it's a little more than this, but you have 2.5 months until you have 2.5 months until the deadline. If nothing changes, I don't know if they're going to buy, I don't think they would.
Right.
They keep saying they won't. They keep saying they won't. Briere has said the plan hasn't changed, all of that. But there does become a conversation of, do you owe it to the guys who were here to try to do what you can without doing anything? You're not going to necessarily
don't trade Nick Seeler. Don't trade these guys who are expiring. Don't trade Ryan Poehling.
One of the one of the keys to that conversation is no, you are not trading the first round pick you got from Florida 2 years ago to say, let's go get something that helps us make the playoffs or maybe win a series or whatever. You don't do that 1 year into the rebuild. But there is an element of, do you owe it to the players who have so far proven everybody wrong, seem to have that chip on their shoulder to do so, and do you just let them move forward with this because they've earned that opportunity by just playing the way that they've played? You can't take away from the fact that nothing's different about the roster that we talked about coming into the season, that I and so many others buried as going to be one of the worst.
I don't know about that, because I think coming into the season, I don't think I looked at this roster and expected Bobby Brink to have the impact he's had. I don't think I looked at this roster and expected Tyson Forster to have the impact he's had. I don't think I expected Travis Sanheim to be maybe not a Norris candidate, but a top 10 goal defenseman in the league.
Well, and that's what I've said about it all along, is to me, the two biggest catalysts were Sanheim and Sean Walker. Those are two guys I sat there and I said, I didn't think this was going to happen. Not a chance.
Absolutely.
Brink and Forster. The thing with Brink and Forster is that guys like that, I think they've contributed to a level that I thought was possible. I didn't think it would equate to winning because of other players. Like I said, I was sitting here waiting for two things. One, I didn't think the defensive core was going to be that good and have players that pitched in the way that they have. And I didn't think that I thought that somewhere along the line, and technically this is true, but it hasn't hurt them. Somewhere along the line, there was going to be a significant injury at forward that was going to derail everything.
Yep.
And technically they've had it because Noah Cates is out, but where are they missing a beat right now?
They're not.
Exactly. And maybe a big part of that was, I think the guy everybody assumes was going to be the trouble with injury was Sean Couturier, whether coming back and just not playing as well, or re-aggravating an injury. One way or another, I don't think we thought that was going to be, the way that it was. And I wrote down a lot of stuff coming into this show because of the fact that now we're another week closer. I had somebody and I've seen this conversation before. And you know what? Carter Hart said something after Saturday's game that I think resonates with this as well, because Carter Hart just flat out said, I don't think people want us to win. And there isn't, and I listen, and he said, I don't think anybody, and I don't think that's true. I don't think that there's anybody that wants them to win. I think that people are more interested when you're winning. So people want them to win in general. But there is a crowd that sits there and goes, don't win now.
This is not good
win
for the
later.
rebuild.
Right. Don't win now, win later. What are you doing?
Wait for Michkov.
Right. And first of all, that hasn't been on the radar all year long. Not with this coach, not with John Tortorella. John Tortorella doesn't know the meaning of the word tank. Doesn't even have it in his vocabulary.
So, and we know that all along.
So throw that out the window. And you know what? Somebody sat there. I got asked on Twitter. This was after Twitter platform, formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah.
You know the drill. But I got asked a question somewhere after the game. I think this was after the Arizona game. So we're another 2 days beyond this point where the Flyers are still in second place, because the whole point of, by the way, where this is going is this included a screenshot of the Metro standings that, look, they're in second place. And all it was the comment was we'll enjoy it for now.
Fair enough.
And my response, because I did respond to this, and my response was, might as well. Last season, the early success of the first 12 games was a nice little run before revealing who the team really was. It's been 26 games, now 27.
27.
By Christmas, and this is a very fair way to look at this because this is 2 more weeks. We're 2 weeks from Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
By Christmas, they'll have played 33. At some point, it's going to stop being early and just become the team's identity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you have to fess up to. I mean,
that's what we're trying to come around to here. We talked on last week's show. We said it's another test week. And what did they do with that test? They freaking aced it. You can't do better than 3-0.
And here's the thing. Like, I don't know, like, there's always going to be, and I think it's fair that there's always going to be this. There's that shadow of a doubt right now that somewhere along the line, this is all going to be over. And it may still be, obviously.
Right. We all expect it to come crashing down at some point.
Just because you're 27 games into an 82-game season, roughly a third, does not mean, no, I know.
A lot of percentage left.
It's still a big percentage. And it doesn't take away from the fact that you are at the moment 2 points away from being right up there pushing the top 5 if you had 2 more.
Yep.
And you're 4 points away from being back, the other direction.
Well, you're 2 points from being out of a playoff spot.
Well, but I'm even going 4 and being, like, realistically speaking, you lose out for 1 week and get no points, you're possibly dropping to 20th.
It's pretty much over. Yeah.
But you're possibly dropping to 20th again. And that's not trying to calm people down and be like, oh, but if they go on a losing streak, they're back in a draft conversation. Like, that's not the point. The point is this is where they are right now. And yes, that there's a lot of time for it to totally change the conversation, but we have to look in the here and now a little bit. We have to.
Absolutely.
And
it's time.
I look at the game against Pittsburgh and I sit there and I go, that was low scoring, hard fought, had a chance to go either direction, and then I watched the last 2 and I go, there were moments where Arizona could have totally changed the course of that game. They were coming at them shooting gallery style at one point, but you ended up winning the game 4-1.
Right.
There's a margin there. And then same thing with the Colorado game where you're getting challenged by their speed. They've got the skill guys. We know the drill with Colorado. I've liked their team for years. We've talked about that before. And then all of a sudden, it got to halfway through the third period. You're holding on for dear life in a 3-2 game, and bang, bang, it's 5-2.
Yep.
And then you get to a point where they're down to what was it? They take the final TV time out of that game with 5 minutes to go, and you're going at 5-2.
They got to really put it together right now.
Yep. Well, no, this is 5-2 with 5 minutes going. You go, they're gonna win the game.
Yep.
Now, like, Colorado getting 3 goals in 5 minutes for as good as they are, is still a challenge.
Yep.
They're going to win the game, and they're going to end up sweeping the week, and they're going to still be in second place. And you start looking around at a few other teams, by the way, and you go, oh, by the way, you know what happened on this Saturday? Because by that point, Carolina hadn't lost yet to still not be right up with them.
Right.
And you go, the Rangers lost 4-0 to Washington. This division's all over the place at any given moment,
Yeah, it is. And you're seeing that Washington team this week. Like, that's going to be a huge game. Game.
And I don't want to jump too far ahead because we're going to talk about certain pieces before we get to the looking ahead part. But the next handful of games that they're going to play, and we'll detail it more when we get into the looking ahead portion at the end of the show. But the next handful of games that they're going to play involve playing teams that I think are another, we talked about kind of this gauntlet that they were going to go through when around the time they played Carolina, Vegas, they were going to play some teams that were good. They played LA during that stretch. Okay. This isn't necessarily that you're going to play the elite of the elite right this second. Like, you're not like this stretch of games that come in.
These are the teams you're in the trenches with.
They are, but this is also
expect to be in the trenches with coming down the stretch.
Well, and I look at it a different way. It's, those are teams that you're right there with, but there's also going to be a stretch of games coming up after this that I'm going to be able to detail. And this is the group of teams that we thought they were going to be with, and they're not now. So you have a chance to maybe show how much better you are than the teams that are in that range that we thought you were going to be in. And who knows if you come out of, what happens? And I'll be generous with this. You don't have to hold second place. What happens if you come out of the next however many games, Christmas break, and come out of it in third in the division and then start playing teams that are ranked where they are?
Right.
And go right back into second because you're winning games again and everybody else may not be. And then next thing you know, we're going to blink and they're going to be at 41 games and we're going to be sitting here having the same conversation potentially. You're not that far off from it. 27 games in to get to 41. It's another one of those, what did we talk about 10 game segments before? You're getting close to being a 10 game segment away from being halfway through your schedule. And you're sitting in second place in the division at the moment.
Right.
Like here's something for you. Cause I wrote a couple things down. I did this with you a couple weeks ago when I asked you about back-to-backs. Cause I asked you a question about last season to this season and how many back-to-backs did the team sweep? And you thought maybe one, and it turned out to be none. And you kind of couldn't believe that it was like, for real, they really didn't sweep a back-to-back at all. And it turns out to be true. So let me ask you this. So the Flyers record is 15-10-2, and we're 27 games in. First of all, that already is essentially halfway to their win total from a year ago. They won 31 games last season in 82. They have 15-27 this year. That's already remarkable.
This feels like the Travis Sanheim point stat that we were talking about earlier in the season.
So here's my two questions. When did the Flyers win their 15th game last season? Date and or game number. I'll give you either or.
Game 44.
You're not far off. It's close, but it was less than that.
Okay.
But 39.
Okay.
And the date of the game was January 5th.
I was going to say sometime in January. So,
well, and think about it. Why? Do you remember what was going on around January 5th last year when in the Flyer schedule?
I don't.
That was around the time that Sam Ersson went on that little run and they won like 4 out of 5 or something like that. Or 5 out of 6, right? Basically, the stretch that everybody pointed to that took them out of the Bedard running.
Essentially, yeah.
Right? Like that was because it was the only other stretch that they had all regular season that really looked like that. Like they had the beginning and they had this little, the basically the Disney on Ice portion they had, and then all of a sudden it was back to losing like they did.
Right.
Because obviously they came out good. They had a 10-game losing streak. They won a handful of games here and there. Then they went on this little run, and it changed things around a little bit. So I want to go back to the point of Danny Briere talking about the plan hasn't changed, because that's what he said pregame, right?
Yeah.
But has it? Has it changed a little bit?
Right.
Like I said, I don't think it means that you're adding players, but just hear me out on the rest of this, and then we'll actually get into the details of these handful of wins this week and some of the key contributors, because there's definitely a few that I want to talk about.
Right.
Because we have to talk about the reason. There's reasons why this team is second in the division, and
absolutely,
and there's individual reasons why it is. But let's just start with why. What about winning? Why are they winning? But what does winning do for this team now? Because obviously there's people out there that don't want this to happen. That think this is a bad thing. And first, John Tortorella has consistently said that they are out there to try to win games.
Absolutely.
So how can you be mad when they do, when that's what the coach is telling you straight up is the goal every night? Whether they have the talent to do it or not is beside the point. He's telling you they're going to go out and try.
Of course.
They're not going to just give it away and do what everybody thinks they're supposed to do. Right. Does it help you get a better draft pick? Obviously not.
Obviously not.
But isn't this also part of the job that the Flyers have entrusted Keith Jones and Danny Briere to do?
Yeah.
Isn't it their job to, no matter where the team picks, you have scouts, you have a development staff, you have management that are supposed to identify players that can make your team better, even then, no matter where you pick.
Well,
there are teams that hit on 14th and 15th overall picks because they have to.
Sure. And for the first time in a long time, I'm willing to give the front office a bit of a fresh opportunity on that. Like I know
Well,
the
that's what I'm
Flyers,
also saying. Haven't they earned
right?
that?
Exactly. Like I
Like,
know the
this isn't
Flyers don't have the best track record when it comes to developing, kind of that mid-level first round talent, but that is an old organization that has essentially no carryover or
well,
very little carryover.
and that's exactly it, right? You want to talk about a new era of Orange that you've been promoting since May, and all that stuff like that.
Develop some prospects.
No, but well, I hear you, but that's fine. What's making people buy into your new era right now? Your team looks better.
Yeah.
So people are going to buy in because at some point in time, you can't ignore what they're doing on the ice. And then what you have to prove on top of it. And let's put it this way. They already have a little bit because you can't lump Cutter Gauthier into this because Cutter Gauthier was not a new era pick, but
Right.
Matvei Michkov sure as hell is. And you can sit
is.
there and look at that and go, okay, you know what? Fine. That's a chance that they wouldn't have taken 5 years ago on that player, knowing what the situation was, knowing what the timeline was. They wouldn't have done it 5 years ago.
Absolutely
and they did
not.
this time. And they've, do you know what you're thinking for the first time in a long time? Honestly.
Okay.
And this goes back to the Colorado game for a second. Nathan MacKinnon scores a goal that only Nathan MacKinnon can score. Not only, but only a handful of players like that can score.
Was stupid.
It's MacKinnon, it's McDavid, it's Matthews, and there's a handful of guys who can do what MacKinnon did to score that.
That is elite hockey talent right there.
And you're looking at that, and you're looking at that, and immediately your thought is, well, the Flyers don't have a player like that on their roster right now, so they can't do that. But there is a little bit in your head that should go, but do they have a guy in the system that can?
It seems like it. And they might have a couple.
Maybe they have a guy, like, at the very least, you sit there and you go, boy, for everything that was said about Michkov, I sure hope that that's what he looks like. Because if that's what he looks like, then they get to a new level.
If he looks like 90% of that, you're thrilled.
Sure.
But if he hits that level, man,
I know.
I'm not trying to get too excited here, as the Flyers fan podcast or whatever. But man, that's the kind of thing that you start looking at.
Right.
The word multiple.
Sure. And I know. And but you know what I mean? Like, finally there's a player within the system like that. You don't have to sit there and worry about where do you go to get him? What where do they have to draft to get a player like that? You drafted one. You drafted one that's going to get talked about. There's a lot of stuff that's got to happen for it to happen at this level. But right now you can hope, and you can sit there and think you've got a player that warrants that hope.
And the best part is, in terms of roster construction, and I know we talked about this kind of when they drafted him, is that he's, for lack of a better term, he's not on your roster screwing it up by being too good, right? Like, how many games did Connor McDavid win the Oilers his rookie year before he got hurt?
Sure. And look better at it.
Right. So from my roster perspective, it's almost good that he has another couple of years to cook in the KHL.
Well, sure, because you're sitting there looking,
theoretically.
Well, you're looking at the record and going, how much better could it be if you have that guy?
Put Matvei Michkov on this team now, and all of a sudden it looks a little silly. But preseason in terms of the roster construction, and again, assuming it is still all going to come crashing down eventually, it is a good thing that he's not on your roster, getting you too many points, if that is where you end up.
But this is where the winning conversation comes back in a little bit, because we consistently talk about and constantly talk about development and younger players. And like, we've been through this so much already. We don't need to rehash all of the fine points, especially, but here's the thing about winning, especially when you're rebuilding. Rebuilding isn't just a roster thing. It's not just, like putting the pieces together to win games and do all that and have a roster that's good enough. You're rebuilding a mentality. You're rebuilding a culture and identity. You're rebuilding belief in a room. And a key part of rebuilding is obviously the part where you gain more talent, and there are ways that you do it. You draft it, you develop it, then you acquire it to finish everything off and think you have a roster that's good enough to win. And a big part of that is identifying the talent and the skill. You mold it, you form a roster that has talent, and implement a style and identity that helps you win games. There are many things that you can teach in this process. You teach power play structure, penalty kill structure, 5-on-5 systems. You work with individual players on their skill sets. What do I want you to do? What do I think will make our team better? All that type of stuff, et cetera, et cetera. You can do all that type of stuff. You know what you can't teach, though? You can't teach how to win a game. because it just has to happen from everything else that goes into it. It's not something that you just don't just manifest winning. It takes something else to happen for you to win, and you have to have the belief and the identity and work on the details and apply the skill, and it all has to come together. And you can sit there and try to keep building the best roster possible, but sometimes the best player that's out there in the world doesn't win you anything because there may not be an overall identity to your team. That's the one thing that this team has. We said it last week with the show last week because you saw what the title was last week. That's what their identity is.
I'm gonna hit you with a little bit of a hot take here.
Sure.
I agree with you that you can't necessarily just manifest winning. You can manifest losing.
But that's what I'm saying.
And I think a lot of credit, I'm going to hit something specific here. I think a lot of credit needs to go to Danny Briere for getting rid of two guys in your room who are the definition of manifest negativity. You traded Kevin Hayes to the St. Louis Blues. We knew he was a core of the locker room. We knew how poor his attitude was last season. We know, we can at least comfortably surmise that he was unhappy in the locker room. And I'm gonna keep it as mild as I can. But we can comfortably surmise that he was not particularly thrilled with where the team was at, where the team was going, etc. And that's the kind of negativity that I've talked a lot on this show about potentially affecting your room. So you get rid of him, you cut him out, and then you have king locker room antics himself, who's gotten healthy scratched in Carolina half a dozen times already this season. And you get rid of him as well. Maybe swapping those two guys out for Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson, just in terms of personality, is enough.
Well,
and then on the ice as well. But just in the room, just on the culture note.
And I'm going to amend your statement a little bit because there's a couple of reasons why. And I want to give full credit here because Charlie O'Connor wrote a story and then talked about it on the show that he does for all PHLY. That also kind of brought this up because they just talked about this on their show fairly recently.
Okay.
The thing about Kevin Hayes is I don't think Kevin Hayes was and I agree with this, and this is what they were trying to talk about too, is it's not that he was necessarily a locker room problem among teammates, because what did we used to sit there and call it? We used to sit there and say, remember, it was the Johnny Gaudreau tampering committee. Absolutely. And Kevin Hayes brought all his buddies in to be in the room. So I don't think the room hated Kevin Hayes.
No.
I think that I think you're right about the way he performed at the end of the year, and that had a lot to do with his relationship with John Tortorella.
There were some pathetic performances in there.
And when you play like that, it can rub off on other people. That part I'll agree with. Yeah. And D'Angelo aside, because I don't even need to go into that.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
But here's a guy who you didn't mention, who I think actually comes to play, and this is going to refer back to the story that Charlie wrote. This is from a few weeks, and this is from a few weeks back, by the way, that Charlie wrote the story, because the story didn't even have to do with this guy. It had to do with Travis Sanheim. It had to do with a current Flyer and how well he's doing, right? But there was a quote in the story that indirectly, without even saying the guy's name, made it clearly obvious who he was talking about. So I'll tell you what the name of the guy was that he was talking about. It was Ivan Provorov, because apparently Sanheim brought up in this particular story that one of the quotes was something about guys there's something about guys making mistakes and I guess owning up to it instead of assuming that it's always somebody else, basically.
Oh man.
So listen, you took away a guy who thought he couldn't make a mistake, even though we all saw him make many mistakes.
Ivan took his shots already. It's perfectly fair if there's a little bit of fire in back. So,
well, and exactly. So, and there you go. So but
let's get a Flyers Blue Jackets rivalry. Come on. Come on, we've been in the same division for a decade now, and we don't care about them.
Here's the thing: it was several weeks ago we brought this up because when last time they played the Blue Jackets, that team's got enough problems of their own as it is to even bring up worrying about another team.
There's a lot of talent on that roster, but they also have some major problems.
But yeah, now on top of all of it, Boone Jenner's hurt for 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it is, right? Or something like that, 6 weeks, because he just broke his jaw. So good luck.
They're playing the lottery game, and that's fine.
Again.
But I would love to see a rivalry come out of that at some point.
No, but by the way, okay, hold on. But by the way, they're playing the lottery game again, right? Like you just said or whatever. we didn't, funny how one player drafted 3rd overall that makes the NHL this year didn't solve all your problems.
Right.
You know,
Well, right,
over
exactly.
the last 3 years, you made a trade that was notable because it was one of the biggest 1-for-1s that we've seen in a long time. You made the biggest free agent signing of the offseason the next year. You went wheeling and dealing this offseason, bolstered your blue line with players that should make you better across the board. We're supposed to, by the way, getting one of your own back on top of it.
Yep.
After he missed half the year. And then you picked 3rd overall. And when you picked 3rd overall, pretty much everybody assumed that in reality, you got the 2nd best overall prospect out of the pool.
By the way, that guy might be doing the he's too good, winning you too many games thing, because like they could very easily be at the bottom with San Jose.
It's been
they're 5 or 6 up. So.
Well, there's been games where it's been a struggle, and
no, it's been bad. We're talking about the bottom of the league, but they could be even worse if Adam Fantilli wasn't playing.
You know what?
Decent.
You know what? Well, I'll get. You know where I'll give you that.
Okay.
If you're going by just wins and not loser points. You're right.
Yeah.
Because they have just about more than any other team that's right there. Like they do have more than every other team, but they're like miles above just about every other team except if you're not Minnesota.
Yeah. They're
in terms of, by the way,
but
in terms of win total, you're right there. I mean, you're tied with there's only 4 other teams that are in the same ballpark as you.
Right.
And there's not much more you can say, but I mean, let's put it this way. The team that is the worst isn't the worst by that much anymore.
No, San Jose won a couple of games, and good for them.
San Jose won a couple of games that sure make. I'm going to tell you what. You know what they've done by winning a handful of those games. By the way, it sure makes when the Flyers lost the first one a lot more of a distant memory now, because they're hardly the only one anymore. And oh, by the way, I believe I saw since that game the Flyers are 10-3-1.
Something like that.
Or something like that.
The Flyers are, yeah, let's get back to the Flyers here. So you were talking about some individual players.
Sure.
Hey, Kevin, who's leading the team in goals?
Travis Konecny is.
And yes, he is.
And I want to bring up, this is going to bring up 2 different points as we go through this, because it's going to bring up your penalty killing point, because he had a shorthanded goal this week, which is another one for the team in general.
The club,
right. It's another one for the team. They've got 7 on the season. That's remarkable in and of itself, obviously. So he's got how many goals this year? I'm sure you're
16.
looking at it. Okay. Yeah. And I knew what the number was.
Pace, by the way.
I saw what the number is. Go ahead.
49.
It's like 48, 49. Yeah. I had 48.
Elite Prospects has it on 49. Fair enough.
Okay. So I want to, so by the way, so in the league, it's a small list, by the way. How many players have 16 goals or more that are equal or better than what Travis Konecny has produced goal-wise this season?
So I haven't looked at this.
Sure. That's why I like doing this, because I know you haven't and I did. So
6.
It's 7.
Okay. Pretty close. Okay.
Who do you think is on that list? Because there's a list of players I have that he's doing better than that is kind of shocking.
Okay. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Elias Pettersson is up there.
No, not in goals. Pettersson's got points.
Really? I could have sworn he had a bunch of goals. Okay.
Not 16 or more.
I thought he did. Okay.
He might be at 15. I didn't look at that group.
Yeah, he's definitely close.
Well, and I didn't look at that group as much. Like the guys that I looked at that Konecny's better than, I'm looking at guys who have like 11, and 12 that I'm sitting there going, oh, they're in the 11 and 12 range, and Konecny's now at 16. Like, it's not a small gap. It's not as small of a gap anymore.
Okay, like who?
That he's better than?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the closest one right off the bat, and it's not like it's 1. Okay, like this guy has 15, he's got 16, but he's doing better than Sidney Crosby is this year.
Good
for 1. Okay, but there's a list of guys that he is significantly better than right now, goal wise.
Okay.
Braden Point and Brad Marchand have 12.
Yeah, Braden Point's on my fantasy team. I knew all about that one.
How about a guy who scored a goal on Saturday that Konecny outscored within the game that he was playing in? Nathan McKinnon has 11.
Okay.
Know another player who has 11? Leon Draisaitl, who normally is at the top of this list.
Yeah, and has a little bit of that. Alex Ovechkin, who I believe is also still below him here.
Well, Ovechkin's number is staggeringly low. compared to the
right.
rest.
And
Here's a guy who's
Draisaitl's got a little bit of that where you kind of expect
here's a guy whose number is lower, and I know he's scoring a little bit more because I saw him all over a highlight reel this week.
Okay.
Connor McDavid has 9.
Wow.
How about a guy who
Edmonton's finally dragging it out of the bottom? So
he is, but it's still 9 goals, and Konecny's at 16. Just say like it's like
absolutely.
McDavid's got to go on a run to get to 16 before he whatever.
Now, by the way, I saw a stat. I saw a real quick stat yesterday just on McDavid. He's at 884 career points. It's not impossible that he hits 1,000 this season.
I already know where you saw that, by the way. But yes,
it was Dangle's Twitter. Sure, it's fine.
No, I know, but well, you know what though? You know why we're talking about that? Because a few weeks ago, when they were truly terrible. Yeah, like they've at least improved a little bit. Where I'm sure
they were shockingly bad,
right? And since the coaching change, they've been a lot better. They've been on a run.
I feel so bad for Jay Woodcroft.
And McDavid is doing McDavid things. I think at one point in time, didn't he have like 16 points in 7 games or something like that in a 7-game streak or something like that? And all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're back, and we're back to the Connor McDavid show. Now this one I threw on the list, and it's a little bit unfair because he did miss a little bit of time. So Jack Hughes has 10.
Okay.
I only did it because of the gap. It's like 16 to 10 is still a gap.
Okay, so you said there's 7 players above him.
And Ovechkin, by the way, is the other one I wrote down because Ovechkin's shockingly at 5.
I was gonna say he's still at like 5, isn't he? Yeah.
I don't remember the last time that I saw Alex Ovechkin come into maybe a game in Philly in December and have less than 10.
Right, and we've talked about it before. He's the kind of player where you kind of expect at some point in time there's going to be an 8-game stretch where he scores 23 goals.
Maybe
that's gonna happen,
but you know what the thing about that is, honestly though, like now that he's into second all time, all eyes are on that race.
That's fair,
and I'm not saying that's
to the point where the team doesn't even care about the roster really,
to an extent, but like you know what I mean. And it's just interesting to watch. All right, so you want to go into the 7 that are better or tied?
Yeah.
Some of them are obvious. So if you want to list like the ones that I didn't mention below that would be up there.
Kucherov's up there, right?
Kucherov leads the league with 19.
Pasternak's up there.
Pasternak is tied with him at 16, which in and of itself is remarkable.
Okay. Who else is there? Has Panarin been producing like that?
Panarin is tied with him with 16.
Okay.
There's one more very, very obvious one that you should mention because I didn't say who out of all that group of goal scorers, the Draisaitl's, McDavid's, McKinnon's, there's a guy who I even mentioned him earlier in terms of skill set about the type of guy that you dream of having because he's better than ever. Matthews.
Oh yeah. Okay. Fair.
Matthews has 18.
Sure,
and then there's 3 more on the list that 3 more on the list that there's one that I would never expect you to think would be on I wouldn't even think he would be on this list. And then there's 2 others that you go, they're good, but it's just right at the top. I don't need you to go crazy with the guesses. If you want to take one more shot, go ahead. But then I want to move it along.
It's not a Dallas Star, is it?
It's not.
Okay.
Here's one hint for you because you asked about Pettersson. There's another Canuck that.
It's Besser.
Yeah, so Besser's at 18. No. There's one other one out of the 2 that are left that I think has done enough to join the conversation of being because he's going to be a star player in the same way that Pasternak is, where his calling card is definitely goal scoring, and he's better than everybody else on his team at it, and that's why he's always up here.
And it's not Jason Robertson?
No, it's another West team though.
Okay. Quick little scan through the West. Canada or non-Canada?
Canada.
Okay. That narrows it down dramatically.
And not one of the Canada teams we've already discussed, like Edmonton.
Okay, so it's not like Nuge. Okay. So that means if it's not Edmonton, if it's not Vancouver, that means it's Winnipeg. Is it Scheifele?
No.
Oh, it's Kyle Connor, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Kyle Connor's got 17.
Hello.
And I'm giving you the last one because there's no way you would expect this guy to be up there, especially at this stage of the season. Sam Reinhart has 17 goals this year.
Yeah.
He's a good goal scorer, but he wouldn't be the guy that you would think would join that.
Didn't Chris Kreider score 50 one year?
Sure.
This feels a lot. This feels a lot like that. Sam Reinhart is essentially the same player as Chris Kreider.
Well, do you know what's interesting about that whole group, by the way, too? But well, like Panarin's up there, so like okay, that's your one Ranger, I guess. But it sure feels like, I mean, Kreider's at 14, so he's not far behind.
That team.
I mean, to be fair, by the way, the other, because I said Crosby has 15, right? So the only two others that are directly behind Konecny that have 15 are Zach Hyman and JT Miller. That's it. Then you're into 14.
Another Canuck, by the way, JT Miller.
Right. But like, do you know where else I wanted to go with this kind of too? Because there's two guys who have 13 that I almost included on the players he's ahead of list because they were off to such hot starts that it wouldn't be shocking if I told you they had 20 by now, the way that they started the year. William Nylander and Alex DeBrincat are still at 13.
Wow.
And for a stretch, it was like they were at like what, 8 or 9, and Konecny was at 7. And it was like, oh yeah, Konechny's right up there, but it slows down and the other guys catch up. And it did. Like, It just turns out that,
in the opposite direction that most people expected.
Well, no, it just turns out that when you play a week where you go 3-0 as a team and you score 4 goals in 2 games, that you're going to jump some people along the way.
Pretty good.
Because let's put it this way. Pittsburgh played games since then. Crosby scored his 15th in the game against Philly.
Right.
In Philly on Monday.
By the way, just on mentioning DeBrincat, did you see the Patrick Kane goal? His first?
Yes, I did.
Man, it's weird seeing him in that jersey.
Well,
it feels very Chelios.
It does feel very weird. I don't want to jump too far ahead again.
Okay.
They're literally in the looking ahead part.
Oh,
of this.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
They're on the schedule for the upcoming week. They're coming to Philly this upcoming or the following, like next weekend. So I don't want to jump too far ahead because I get obviously I get a look at that,
man, that's crazy.
And there's also like that roster, by the way, there's some question marks that are going to come up about that because there's some things that happened over the weekend that we're waiting for more information. Let's just put it that way. We're waiting for a lot more information before we can say who's going to play in that game on Saturday in Philly.
That's fair.
Specifically with 2 of their forwards.
Right. But as we sit here,
so that's the Travis Konecny part of it. No, by the way, Konecny this week had 4 goals, 3 not this week. In the last 5 games. I wrote this down because here's something else that's happened over the last handful of games that matters. Okay. You've got some lines building chemistry, especially now that and this is nothing against Noah Cates, but when a guy comes out of the lineup and guys step in and start filling in, you got to look for opportunities where it fits. There are, at this point, you have an entire line that over the last 5 games is point per game. And then you have another 2 players at forward that are not at point per game, but definitely solidly above a half a point a game, contributing. And really, like, you'll pick up on it pretty quick when I mention 2 of them, or the other 2, that they really contributed a lot more in the last couple of games than they did in the first couple of the 5 games I'm talking about. All of which, by the way, the 5 games, like, they've won 4 in a row, and the 5th game was the New Jersey game where they still got it to overtime. So they're on a 5-game points streak.
Right.
So that's what qualifies this. And then there's a defensive pairing that is right near point per game as well. And I'm pretty sure that one's that's an easier one to figure out because what defensemen they're putting up points. But the line of Tyson Forrester, Sean Couturier, and Travis Konecny, you can't touch that right now. Coaching wise, I mean, you can't do anything to that. Like, they've got to play together.
That is with the production of Travis Konecny this year and the emergence of Tyson Forrester, because he has looked really, really good. That is an NHL first line. It might not be a top tier NHL first line. I'm not, delusional here, but that's an NHL first line. That is not embarrassing.
Because the thing that you're going to circle is you look at and specifically at the Pittsburgh game this week, because we already talked about the Pittsburgh game in Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh game this week, you won the game 2-1 in overtime. And who did everything beyond the other obvious answer in that equation, which we'll get to because I have him written down too. Is Forrester scored the goal in regulation, and it's a 2-on-1 with Konecny and Couturier in overtime, and Couturier scores another overtime winner.
Yep. Just your top line producing. That's all it is.
What happens for teams that end up being good? When it counts, you lean on the best players.
Yep. When you get 2 goals in a 2-1 game against the divisional rival, they both come from your top line.
By the way, in the game itself, because Konecny's got 4 goals in the last 2 games.
Yep.
He had a game against Pittsburgh where he could have scored 2 to 3 more with the opportunities he got. He didn't. He ended up with 2 assists in the game instead. Doesn't matter. He'll take it because they ended up winning the game. So it doesn't matter to him. But I can't help but think about the fact that we're already sitting here talking about he's got 16 goals. He's right up there with these league leaders. And the game he played on Monday was so good that he could have ended up with 2 or 3 more. And been like at 18.
If the Flyers are a real team and end up kind of staying in the playoff race and making the push, Travis Konecny will get Hart Trophy conversation.
Well, I don't even need to go into that discussion. You know where I want to go with that one is, simply put, what have we talked about since almost the beginning of the year? Because there's a lot of people that sit there and tell you they should trade him. He's their best trade chip, all that stuff like that. But he falls right in the middle of it. And you know what? No. Do you have a true superstar on the roster per se? Not necessarily, but he's enough of a star. He's an all-star.
Absolutely.
And you got, and you know what, for a team that we constantly sit there and talk about doesn't necessarily have a guy who I think you can sit there and go, oh, he takes over. Like, I still don't think Travis Konecny takes over a game like McDavid. And I don't think he ever will.
No.
Because McDavid's another class. But Konecny may fall into that tier that like Claude Giroux did all those years, right?
I agree. I agree. Well, and the thing is, even Travis Konecny's 26. 3 years from now, he'll be 29. Like, even if you are trying to build a young team with, a Michkov and Brink and, all these young kids and Forrester and Gauthier and et cetera, you still need veterans on that team.
Do you know what he is at 29 when that happens?
A phenomenal veteran, probably your captain.
One of your leader, one of your leadership core. Yeah,
exactly. Like,
he gets a letter at least. Yeah.
You can't have an entire locker room full of 25 and younger. Like, it just doesn't work.
Like,
you need some amount of grit. You need the guy who's chirping Evgeny Malkin in the Stadium Series. You do,
but you know what? Over the course of these last handful of games, he hasn't even been that noticeable doing that.
That's fair.
He's still a pest. He's still going to stand up for his teammate, but he's not doing it near at the level. And look what's happening instead. He's literally just going in there. You know what? Score a goal on a little bit of a breakaway or whatever the case may be. For your second goal of the game in Arizona, like he did on Thursday. I know he did this, and I know he scored 2 in Colorado too. But like for the second one in Arizona, and take your shot. Skate to the side like you do, and then look at the crowd and do the come on, whatever. Because that's kind of his thing. He's been doing that a lot. And it's like, dude, go ahead and do that. You know why? Because that's how you're hitting other teams. That's how you're hurting other teams at this point. You're not trying to go in there and be a pest every single, like you are, but you're not doing. That's not the only thing you're doing. You're scoring goals you're scoring goals, especially at times where you're literally taking and putting the dagger in them.
Obviously,
where was that Colorado game going before the penalty shot?
That's fair.
You're getting pushed on. They're pushing on you. They're putting all the pressure on you. It's a 1-goal game. You're one mistake away from something happening. And he gets a rush and he gets taken down before he gets the shot off. So they call the penalty shot and he goes in, and it didn't have to even be like, is it a pretty goal? Absolutely not. The thing hit the pad and spun and spun like a golf shot and went right into the net like he wanted it to, but you take it, and he walks away and he skates away from it with this look of like, yeah, okay, you know what? Because it's a game changer at that moment. You're almost halfway through a third period that you've been holding on to the whole game or the whole period, and now you've got breathing room. And what happens not even a minute later? You add another one. Now the game's over.
Yeah, the extra insurance, but
right. Yeah, and now the game's over because you just ripped their heart out after the start of that period.
So it's not a clean 1-for-1 comparison because they don't have the same accolades. But if Travis Konecny's career roughly follows that of Brad Marchand, I mean, is anyone upset about that?
No, you'd be thrilled.
And it seems like that's kind of where he's at, where he can bring
especially if that's not Gauthier and not Michkov. Like if they're different personalities and take on the comparisons of different players,
then you do need a little bit of that somewhere.
Like seriously. No, and I'm not trying to say this is the way it's gonna be because Gauthier does not have this defensive ability, nearly this defensive ability. But what if Gauthier was your Bergeron in that equation, and what if Michkov was your Pasternak? And then Konechny's your Marchand, who's got the little edgy side to him. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. I'm not comparing because, first of all, to compare anybody to Bergeron's insane.
Of course, right.
But I'm saying in terms of building a top line, what if Gauthier if Gauthier gets even a mild two-way ability about him, right? And then Mishkov's your star.
And I could see Noah Cates being a decent little David Krejci.
A little bit. The problem with Cates is, and look, being injured doesn't help because now you're missing time.
Of course.
But the point production.
But we're talking about long-term development.
No, I know. But this year, the point production just wasn't there. You're talking about a guy who last year had 13 goals, 38 points, and this year in a quarter of the year had a goal and 3 assists. The production wasn't there. Like I wrote down a couple of different players and their comparison numbers, just going from year to year. Let's do a couple of them. First of all, because Konecny's the easiest one. And by the way, Konecny is a funny one to look at because Konecny's got the 16 goals. He's hit more than halfway to passing the career high he set last year. We're barely a third of the way through the year.
Right.
He played 81, by the way, or he played 60 last year. I'm sorry. So maybe it was always in there to begin with, because if you go off of the 82 game pace from a year ago, it was already pushing 40 to begin with. Right. So he's definitely on track for that. The funny part is he's only got 7 assists this year and he had 30 last year. So he's nowhere close to matching the goals and the assists to be that total points. But maybe that balances out by the end. But maybe that balances out by the end of the year. I mean, we what did we say? We said a third of the way through the year. He's still on pace. He's still on pace for the 61 that he had last year, point wise.
And anyone will tell you that goals are more important.
Well, and maybe that look, if that's more of his calling card, you take it. Here's a couple of others. I'm not going to mention everybody I wrote down because that would take too long, but there's a handful I'll go through. Joel Farabee, 82 games last year, 15 goals, 39 points. This year, 27 games, 10 goals, 17 points. It's almost right on par. But you know what number is better? He's got 10 goals already, and he had 15 in 82 last year.
Yep.
Someone's got his goal scoring touch back, and he's another one who scores in a bunch of different ways. It comes and goes. He's going to be streaky, but
sure. And we've talked about the fact that he looks like he has fully recovered from the surgery and is starting to be a little more comfortable, and that is something that he might even still be shaken out a little bit.
But by the way, if Travis Konecny is on a near 48 goal pace, let's just say,
sure.
What's 10 and 27 look like? It's at least 30.
Right around 30.
Right. Yep. It's at least 30.
I'm pretty happy.
So Joel Farabee might be a 30 goal scorer by the end of the year if this keeps up. Tyson Forster's turned it on lately because now all of a sudden the numbers look a little bit better anyway. 5 goals, 11 points in 26 when you started the way that you did and couldn't put together an offensive number for all of the details that they talk about. You couldn't put together an offensive number, and now he's kind of putting up points on a regular basis again. And that's a byproduct of playing with who you're playing with. I mean, you're playing with the team's leading scorer and you're playing with Sean Couturier. That helps, but still. Owen Tippett, 9 goals, 17 points in 27 games. He had 27 and 49 and 77 last year. He's right on that pace again to be basically 25 to 30. And his comes and goes.
And he's on that third line right now.
Second-ish, second, third-ish. Yeah.
So you're getting production from your lineup.
Sure. Yeah. But those are really the 4 guys to me. And because Brink doesn't even qualify for this yet, but those are the 4 guys to me or 4 or 5 guys to me, because I'll include Couturier in it, because Couturier, we have nothing to go off of from the last handful of years.
Right.
You don't do and you don't need to do comparisons for him. He's been in the league long enough that typically
who Sean Couturier.
Well, you know what he was at his best. At his best, he was 30 some odd goals and 75-ish points.
Yep.
So
also, by the way, winning the
Selke.
The Selke. I mean, it's
sure.
So it's not just 75 points. It's 75 points with elite defensive skill. So.
Yeah. So what is he at this year? You know what I mean? So he's at 6 goals, 13 assists, 19 points in 25.
Yeah.
Is 6 goals in 25 games going to put him at 30? Probably not. Is it going to put him at 20?
Yeah.
Good chance.
Yeah. It puts him in the 60 range on the points.
And is roughly 60, and it depends on how much he heats up as the year goes on too. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was playing for the first time in nearly 2 years.
The power play clicks for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden he's on a 70-point pace.
I don't even know if it needs that. I mean, he can get that, in a variety of ways. But that's all right. So that's one key guy. We need to talk about another player, and I'll make this a part of the reason as our discussion for them be in second place, because
Yeah.
this guy's probably one of, if Konecny's your number one skater reason that you're doing some of the things you're doing, then this guy's another reason you're doing the things you're doing. So we got to go to goaltending. We got to go to Carter Hart. So
Carter Hart has a .919 save percentage,
which by the way, among league leading qualifying goaltenders is 7th.
Is that good?
It's really good.
Top third of the league.
Do you know what else ranks tied for 7th among league leading goaltenders?
Is it
a 2.42 goals against average? That's what happens, by the way, when you lose 4 games in a row like he did.
And to be fair, half the people above him are backups on great teams. So,
well, it depends. Like I did it based off of what the league ranks, and it's some of the guys are legitimate enough that I kept them in there.
No, I got you. But like Quick's a backup.
Yeah,
he's playing a bunch of games, but he's still a backup. One of Thompson or Hill, like they're kind of splitting it, but
right.
You got some really, really, really.
But I'm saying this is what happens this is what happens when you lose 4 games in a row like he did, and it goes down a little bit, and then you win 3 games, you give up a grand total of 4 goals over the 3 games, and your save percentages individually from the 3 games we're talking about are .969, .962, and .947.
Right.
Then your save percentage shoots through the roof. Like I looked like. Speaking of which, by the way, and I know that Colorado is a talented team. I'm not trying to say it, but I blinked and looked up and realized all of a sudden, oh yeah, by the way, they took 38 shots in the game.
Oh yeah.
Like
they were
we're going to sit there and talk about Travis Konecny a whole bunch because of the way Travis Konecny played and scores 2 more goals.
Goals are flashy.
Goals are. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Owen Tippett having 2 points in the game. We're going to talk about Bobby Brinken having 2 points in the game, and Joel Farabee scored another goal, and this and that and all that. And Travis Sanheim with 2 more points, a goal and an assist. The goals are not even part of his regular thing or anything like that. And how about the play, by the way, that he makes 2 on the assist to drive the net with confidence? Like Tortorella flat out said it after the game too. He didn't do that once last year. And he's probably I'm not sure if he didn't do it once, but he's probably close to right, because I don't recall him ever having that kind of confidence last year. He's got tons of it right now.
He's playing great, and he deserves every ounce of it. He's playing great.
And yet you blink and you go, oh yeah, by the way, Carter Hart made 36 saves on 38 shots. They took, by the way, right at the very tail end of the game for a second, it was 37 on 39. Somewhere along the way, they took one of them away.
Oh, okay.
But it's nonetheless. And oh, by the way, the rest of the week was 31 to 32 and 25 to 26. And you literally sweep the week with him in goal the entire time.
Yeah, and I know the stats don't necessarily show it, but I think Sam Ersson has been playing pretty solid. I know he had a rough start to start the season, and things have been a little rough at certain points here, but overall, recently, I think he has looked much better.
He has. This is why you have me here, because I actually did I put the numbers together from his last 4 starts for you.
Yeah, I'm looking at his last 4. Yeah.
Okay, so
a 921, a 909, a shutout, and then a 906.
So overall, he's got a 278 goals against and an 885 save percentage. The 85 doesn't even rank on the charts. Right. And a lot of that has to do with that one game, by the way, where he gives up 7 against Anaheim. And I said, if they were smart, they would have left, Sandstrom to be the backup that day. So you could have gotten him out of there so it doesn't look so bad at the end.
Absolutely. Instead, he comes out of that game with a 720 save percentage and 7 goals on the record.
The 278 overall actually is tied for 16th in the league.
Yeah, that's coming around.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, if you want to play the game where you're like, oh, by the way, Carter Hart's tied for 7th, but there's backups ahead of him, then throw Sam Ersson's tied for 16th and say, listen, he's up there with the top 20 goaltenders in the league in goals against, despite the fact that there's other starters that fall into that equation. I believe both of Toronto's goalies have a worse goals against. It's not by much, but still it would be like Joseph Wall was right below him at 280.
Okay.
And it's like, oh, he's actually playing, forget Carter Hart for a second. Ersson's playing better by the numbers than Toronto's goalies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But here's goalies have been one of their problems.
But here's the goals against and save percentage of the last 4 games for Ersson. The goals against is a 1.92, and the save percentage is 932.
Those are much better.
Those are elite numbers.
Yes, and now that is a small stretch, but that is.
But
production.
He's your backup.
Yep.
and it's well known he's your backup.
Right.
So,
and if he keeps playing like that, then you're going to be able to give Carter Hart a little bit more rest and a little bit more breaks and keep him a little more fresh. And
by the way, can we make another note on Carter Hart really quick? Because this is also, we've talked about this in the past, and now it's actually kind of like, I'm talking in years past, and it's finally kind of being realized. And I want to throw the caveat on it, because for right now, look, we're watching this team with Carter Hart in goal, and it looks like they have an answer to that question and all that stuff like that. Because this is by the numbers, by the way. If you go with the 242 goals against, the 919 save percentage, these are his best numbers of his career since 1920, when everybody thought you had your answer then, right? Like those 3 years in between brought everybody down a peg, made a lot of people in the fan base think he's not your answer in goal, trade him, do this, do that. And he's answering the call nightly anymore. I do want to throw it in with the caveat that I'm not trying to gloss over the still hanging question in the air that doesn't seem to have a resolution.
Of course.
But for now, he's a flyer. And for now, he's the answer to your problem of goaltending. Well,
and for now, he's tied for 4th all time in franchise wins.
That's what I wanted to bring up, because we talked about it back in 1920, when I think after 1920 or somewhere in the range of it, he was pushing 50 at the time. And we're like, that already is like pushing top 10.
Man, by the way, the guy he's tied with, Wayne Stevenson, only played 165 games.
That's crazy. He played back from you're talking, he was playing 75 to 80-ish. And the team was just ridiculously good at the time.
He went 93, 35, 23 ties.
I was going to say, for what it's worth, by the way, because
crazy.
Well, he's tied for that one. He wins another game. He passes. He's fourth. He's 4th all time among goalies. Then the goalie he's chasing for context.
That's the wildest part to me. The stat popped up on the broadcast the other night. They showed the top 5. They showed that Carter Hart was racing the list, and I looked at it.
And 1 and 2, and by the way, 1 and 2 are exactly who you think they are.
I see Ron Hextall at 240, and I go, okay, that makes sense.
And
then
you
I
see Bernie
Perron at 231. That makes sense. Then I look down, I see 104, and I say, oh, that's a big drop off. I wonder who that is. Was Pelly here long enough? Was that one of Czechmonic or Van Beesbrook? And I look over, and it's Steve Mason.
Isn't it nuts? I mean, and
this show started, Steve Mason was the goalie.
That's true, actually.
Oh my God, Steve Mason was the goalie on this team when this show started.
But you get.
By the way, it's episode 200. First time I wanted to mention that here.
Yeah, I know. I figured we were gonna as we wrap. We were gonna.
Yeah, we are absolutely.
As we did, we were gonna hit a couple quick things. But in that that was my whole point, and I think we had talked about this when Hart was catching steam in 2019-20, was it's not going to take much.
The records are very attainable to at least get up there.
Not necessarily. I don't want to make it seem like he's you never want to make it seem like he was going to be around long enough.
I just mean you climb the list
to do
pretty
200
quickly.
wins or anything like that, to be one of those guys. But only 3 goalies in Flyers history have 100. And it was very distinctly possible that you were looking at a kid who came up at 20 years old, was winning games with some regularity at the beginning of his career.
Right away.
And go,
uh-oh.
He's going to be the 4th one. He's going to be the 4th 100 guy, and he might pass.
Watch out, Steve Mason.
Right, and he'll pass Mason pretty quickly, because Mason's literally sitting at 104. So he gets to 105. At this point, based on the way they've started the year, we're only 27 games into the season.
If he signs another contract in Philadelphia, he's going after those records.
No, but he needs what? 11 wins to get the 3rd all time?
Yep.
He's getting it this year with the way things are going.
Probably. He might get it by the end of January, the way things are going.
Potentially. I mean, you never know. But you
by
know
the
what
All-Star
I mean.
break.
But you know what I mean? It's just one of these things where you're like, listen, it's not going to take much for him to be right up. I mean, even the other numbers, by the way, his save percentage is one of the higher ones among the group. And it's, is his goals against there for his career? No, because those 3 years that were rough hurt you from a goals against standpoint. I mean, and listen, we regard Pelle Lindbergh as one of the best goalies in franchise history. Straight up, his goals against numbers were not good, because that was the era he played in. He played, that was the Gretzky's era and all that stuff like that, right? Adjusted, it was one of the best. But
by the way, if you include playoffs, Carter Hart sits 5th all time at 102.
Okay, so Mason has a few in there.
106.
I said a few. I didn't mean a ton.
So he is only.
I mean, Hextall's definitely.
Wayne Stevenson is still in between. Yes. He is still in between. He's at 103. But Carter Hart could pass Steve Mason for most wins, including playoffs. I mean, by the end of the month, by Christmas.
And next month, I'll say maybe.
I mean, he's at 102. Mason's at 106.
Oh, you're talking about including playoffs.
Yeah, including playoffs.
Okay,
yeah. He could do that by the end of the month.
Just to overall pass Mason in general, though, he's 11 away from passing him. I mean,
right on the regular season.
Is 11 is it possible that we're talking? I mean, let's just say 11 wins by the All-Star break.
Absolutely, that is very doable.
I mean, it's possible. I don't know about
if the wheels fall off, he'll get there by the end of the season, and that's fine. But I mean, if this team stays rolling,
the goaltending's been one of the keys to everything so far. I mean, you can't deny that, and it's part of what like now they've won a couple of games that you say, okay, that style's a lot more sustainable. But beforehand, it was like, okay, the goaltending's been really good, and they're kind of finding a way. And I still like the funny part is I still equate that to they found a way against Pittsburgh in that overtime game. Like there's plenty of chances where that goes wrong the other direction, right? And I didn't think I'm with Tortorella on this one, by the way. I didn't think they played great against Arizona.
No, I agree.
And yet they won the game 4-1. So
well, and Arizona's not exactly a juggernaut.
John Tortorella,
find a way to beat them.
If there's something, because I think Arizona's a sneaky good team anyway, so I don't even need to go there. But John Tortorella has a way, especially when you play a game where you win 4-1 like that, outside of your goaltender, who clearly was really good, of keeping everything else in check and being like, it wasn't that great. Like, you're second in the division. You've won 4 games in a row. If they by the way, and this will be a great looking ahead point.
Yeah,
so let's start with it. Yeah. If they beat Nashville, they'll have their second 5-game winning streak of the season in 28 games.
Oh, well, the Flyers have won 10 games in a row before and missed the playoffs. So let's see if 2 5-game winning streaks is better than 1 10-game.
They've also had 2 10-game losing streaks in the same calendar, like in the same season, and 3 in the same calendar year before. So
stop. That was awful.
I know, but I'm saying this is what I'm saying. Like he's like everybody's got ways of making things like that try to seem better than they are. If you've lost a bunch of games in a row, we're close though. If we just get a bounce, we're due for one. It's gonna happen. Blah blah blah. And there are others where and then you win a few games in a row, and Tortorella's out there telling you, whatever. We've won a few, but it's still not. We got a lot of work to do.
Of course, we are we are tempering expectations, right? Like that is kind of what this whole show has been about.
Yeah, but you know what? Then here's a coach we've talked about plenty of times because we like him as a coach and all that stuff like that. You got Rod Brindamore telling you his team looks like they're going to lose 50-0 during the course of a game. They end up, they lost badly otherwise, but it wasn't 50-0. I think it was only 5-0. But
my favorite is Brian Boucher talking about it on the broadcast as Cam York is just absolutely dangling in the slot.
That's another guy, by the way. That's another guy, by the way. If he gains some confidence.
What do you mean if? What do you mean if?
He's doing it, but I'm saying if he prolongs it over the course of more than a week or two.
All right. So if he prolongs it, he will do it this week. Let's talk about these teams that the Flyers got. So you mentioned Nashville here.
This is an interesting game, by the way, because I didn't Nashville for a few weeks was awful. I mean, they were pushing the group that's at the bottom with your Columbus level teams, right? They've improved now. Apparently, by the way, so they're actually one game or a point better than the Flyers are in the last 10, if you want to be technical about it. But they are in a playoff spot. They're in a playoff for sure. They're 7-3-0 in their last 10 games.
Yeah, they're rolling.
So they're having a good little run of it right now. And despite the fact that the record says they're basically slightly above 500, they're 14-13-0. That's an interesting stat, by the way. To look at a team's record through 27 games and see a 0. What team usually how many? I don't think there's another team in the league that has a 0 in the OT loss column.
Anaheim, Ottawa.
Ottawa. That's it.
And also Anaheim.
Yeah, I was agreeing with you with the Anaheim and Ottawa.
Okay. Yeah.
Ottawa hasn't played Ottawa has played so many fewer games though. Ottawa's only got 22 games played. For Anaheim, it's a little remarkable. I'll give you that. But like, yeah, it's definitely remarkable otherwise.
It's pretty
But
rare
usually,
in today's NHL though.
but usually everybody's got one, you know, a
Something
shootout
happened at some
loss,
point,
an
right.
overtime loss, something. Nope.
But no,
Not
that
them.
Nashville team is clicking a little bit. Ryan O'Reilly looks pretty comfortable there. Like they're starting to put it together.
Philip Forsberg's still like the guy, obviously, and
really
and Roman. I love watching Roman Josi play. This isn't the home game yet. That's coming up very short order. Like this is one of those season series that's going to be over in the blink of an eye because we're gonna over the course of 2 weeks we're going to talk about them twice and then we'll never talk about them again.
Right.
Probably. You know, maybe playoff time if they're in the playoffs. I had them in the playoffs. I said I thought they were a potential playoff team. So. I mean, I did it reluctantly because I kind of couldn't figure out who I wanted to pick out of the West to be like the last wild card, but I'll give them, I gave them a shot and they're actually like, after being terrible to start the year, they're actually proving me right a little bit that they could be in that running.
Right.
So you got them in the mix. I mean, here's the thing though. They're also right in the same category as where Arizona was and you beat Arizona. So
exactly. If
they're right in your they're right in your general class here. You have 32
Absolutely.
points. They have 28.
And then after finishing the little mini central swing, you do get to come home and play Washington on Thursday.
Now that's going to be a fascinating game.
Yeah.
Because that's a team that technically you're better than in the standings, but points percentage wise, they're better than you.
And it is also just been hot. Like, again, another team that had a really, really poor start and has played really well since then to kind of overcome it.
What are they at in the last 10? They're 5-4-1 in the last 10, but they're picking it up a lot lately.
They've cooled down it a little bit, but that middle stretch there, they were really, really hot.
And the win they just had against the New York Rangers of all teams. I mean, to beat the Rangers 4-0 is a big deal. It's a
huge win for them.
It's definitely a big deal. So they're going to be tough. And
again, there is always like Ovi's going to wake up one day, we think. So that is still a ticking time bomb on any day now. He could just put three.
Let's be real about something. I mean, you're killed. Like they killed off a penalty against Colorado, and the first penalty they killed against them, it looked like it was just a straight up onslaught. Yeah. And it didn't have to be. I mean, like they could have it was interesting too is Bush said something on the broadcast about man, you don't want to give them many more opportunities, and they gave him one more for the game. Like that was fairly, like that was first period. You were like, okay, this is rough.
Out of Bush.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, so that's the Washington game for you. Now let's get to this Detroit game really quick.
Absolutely, Patty Kane.
Well, the Patrick Kane element is going to be is definitely a big part of it because that's the new wrinkle to this whole thing or whatever. Detroit as a team, just in general, by the way. First of all, the former Flyer element is heavy on this one because I wouldn't be shocked. I'll just say it that way. I wouldn't be shocked if your goalie that night is potentially Alex Lyon because he's been getting some starts lately. So I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. They obviously have Husso and could be him, but Lyon's played a few games lately, and you could certainly bring him into the equation.
But you're here to talk about top line or top pairing Shane Gostisbehere, aren't you?
Well, I was going to bring him into the mix because of the fact that he does have 5 goals and 19 points in 25 games.
And he's playing with Moritz Seider.
Which are very, to this point in the season anyway, which are very comparable numbers to Travis Sanheim so far. I mean, like, you're talking about like the resurgence of both.
By the way, I didn't know Moritz Seider wore 53. That's pretty funny that Ghost is playing with him.
Yeah, I mean, Ghost went back to like the play on 14, where if he could get 14, he would wear it. If not, he flipped the numbers. Like, he went back to that, but
that's fair.
But we need to talk about two forwards on the roster that may or may not be playing depending on how things go. And again, it's all information to be determined later.
Of course.
The whole situation in the game they had against Ottawa on Saturday, Dylan Larkin ended up leaving the game for a little while. He was motionless on the ice. It was a very scary situation.
Yeah.
He somehow or other, as they had a stretcher out there for him, got up and skated off the ice with help of his teammates. He is a tough,
like, stubborn, tough, old school.
And to top it all off too, like within the week, I think he had put out some very personal information that he and his wife decided to share.
Yep.
That like it was just like, how much more is this guy supposed to take? It's been and he's and to top but on top of it, by the way, he shares the really deep personal news that everybody obviously deepest condolences to his family, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And he goes out and he either scored the game winner or the game tire or something in Buffalo or against Buffalo the same week. Like, right as they put it out, like, and the team's going nuts for him because on top of it, he's their captain. So
they all know, yeah.
And then they ended up having the game against San Jose that they looked like they were going to run away with, and then they ended up losing it, kind of in shocking fashion. And then once they were down, they were not only down Larkin, they were down to 8. I think to 8. They played 8 forwards for the rest of that game. They already went 11-7 against Ottawa to begin with.
Right.
They instantly lost 2 forwards on the same play, and then I think they lost another one as the game went on. So they were playing with like 8 forwards. It was terrible. And that's where part of the discussion comes in, because when Larkin's down on the ice motionless, David Perron went after Artem Zub and literally picked the first guy he saw to just throw a cross check high on, even though Zub was actually like, Zub fell on Larkin afterwards inadvertently. Like, he's battling for positioning there too. He wasn't even one of the players that initially hit Larkin.
Right.
He ends up falling on him. He's standing over top of him, like looking like with this look toward the bench, like, please hurry up. Come on, please hurry up. And then just takes one to the side of the head.
Yeah. That got nasty.
There's going to be a phone call for that.
Yeah.
And I think that you almost want, let's put it this way. Detroit plays more games this week than the Flyers do. So this is not a straight 3-3. So I don't know. I don't know if Perron's getting 4 for this.
He might.
Like, I can see just as easily see 2.
I don't think he has a history. So
no. They categorize it the right way. It was an intent to injure.
As of 22 minutes ago, Chris Johnston, he has been offered an in-person hearing, which means his suspension can be in excess of 5 games. So he might be getting the book.
What he did was very and again, it's hard. Look, sure, your captain's laying on the ice motionless. It's hard to control your emotions in that spot, and he did. He picked the first guy he could find.
Yep.
Which, by the way, the whole thing that bothers me about those situations is it has nothing to do with trying to go after somebody. You want a piece of somebody for what happened. What I hate is when they do it right over top of the guy's motionless body, as if that's not a dangerous thing to do. Like,
man, Taylor Hall getting kicked in the head while he's unconscious will just always.
Sure, it's just dangerous.
Yep, you just see his head just. Oh, it's awful. Yeah, that is terrible, and it just take it away from the play. If you want to scrap the guy, that's fine. Grab him and drag him out to center ice.
Right. And everybody wanted a piece of somebody, and you're like trying to,
you got to protect the player first.
Like, there's almost an element of 2, and I think some of the Ottawa players were a little bit aware of this, at least. Like, it's like, all right, listen, I know what's coming. We're gonna do this right now.
Y'all are mad. We're going.
No, right. But there was almost an element where for certain players it was, hang on a second, like Lucas Raymond was huddling around for a second, and Raymond actually, I think, was better at it. Like, in that sense, he kind of pushes somebody away, and it's like, I know we're mad at each other right now, but no, just get out of here for a second so I can stand over top of my teammate and wave for the trainer to get out here, please.
Right. I want my guy to not get crushed here. Right.
Like you saw how intense it was too. It was Gossespierre and Robbie Fabry were the 2 guys who grabbed onto Larkin's arms and helped him skate off. And Fabry's bleeding at the time. He's got his, blood streaking down his cheek. And
some old school hockey.
And he's, nope, not me. Don't worry about me. I don't need not even a towel. Just let's get this guy off the ice. And Larkin has this was well documented in the clip, like on the broadcast and stuff, that Larkin's got a history of neck injuries too. So that's why it's scary on top of it. So
definitely.
And the thing is they play Detroit not only on Saturday, but then again in a week,
right? Like
the following Friday. So there's a distinct possibility, depending on what happened with Larkin, once we get more information, because all it was that he was being treated. He's obviously, like, he skated off the ice. He's conscious. It wasn't like one of those things, but the severity of it, we have no clue on yet. And we won't probably until at least later Sunday, maybe Monday even. Because Sunday might just be a day off for everybody, and they just let it sit for the day while he gets tested.
It's gonna be a day off because I believe they have a back-to-back Monday, Tuesday. So
sure. So there you go. But and they're gonna have to let people know going into Monday what the deal is. I find it hard to believe he's gonna play Monday or Tuesday at the very least.
The Grand Rapids Griffins are scrambling to get a
and to be fair, like, that's why I even said you play this team twice in the next 2 weeks. It's possible he's not available, and that's a huge blow for them.
If that's the case, you have to win those games. That's the kind of thing.
Well,
if we're looking at this as a playoff push, right?
Well, sure, and I get that. What I'm going to say is, and this is what they were literally alluding to on the broadcast right before he scored the first goal he has as a Red Wing was, well, now like there's no such thing as easing Patrick Kane in anymore. You're playing with 8-9 forwards. He's going to play. He's going to get minutes,
and he's going to play a lot.
So you're going to see a healthy dose of Patrick Kane next week. Yep. Like you just are, and
that'll be interesting.
And we know there's chemistry with DeBrincat. That's going to be a key factor of this. There's already chemistry.
Yep.
And
if they can find out,
the thing that hurts with Larkin is it takes a big piece out of the middle. Yes. Obviously, I mean, it takes a huge piece right out of the middle because Larkin's such a well-rounded player, and really for a team like as that team got better, he was clearly one of the guys leading the way. And that's, and for a guy who made the choice, he made the choice to stay. They weren't doing the best at the time when like the contract thing rolled around. And now they're in a playoff spot too. That's why I'm saying
very interesting there. If he misses some significant time, Stevie Y might look to make a trade.
He might have to. Yeah.
And it might be this week. Like we might see,
who knows?
You don't know. You never know.
Well, he already played the long game when it came to Kane. So you might as well, see what he has up his sleeve for that too. I mean,
exactly.
We've talked plenty of times about the Yzer plan, and sometimes the Yzer plan has to take a detour, but he might figure out a way to do it. So
absolutely.
But this, what's interesting about this week too, because you mentioned Nashville being in a playoff spot now too. So you're getting three teams that are right in the thick of it with you.
Absolutely.
And that was kind of the case with, Pittsburgh wasn't obviously, but that was kind of the case with Arizona and Colorado, obviously. Like you were going to get tested there, but you're legitimately getting, you're going to play Nashville first. So there's a decent chance Nashville is right there in that playoff picture still as you play that game. They might be slightly out of it. Who knows? Because they're right on the bubble. Right. But there's no questions about Washington's technically out of the playoffs, but they have a higher points percentage than you. So you got to treat it that way. And then Detroit is still, has pretty much consistently, not only has Detroit consistently been in a playoff spot, but the Flyers have one of the better goal differentials in the league, or in the conference at least. Detroit's one of the few that's better.
Okay.
And you're going to have to see what happens here. And that's the interesting part, because Detroit, certainly when they had to play the game they did against Ottawa, that goal differential took a hit in that one game alone. They lost 5-1.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's another good normal week in the NHL schedule where you got to test against three good teams. There's no freebies this week. There's no San Jose's. There's no, any of those.
But what you got to factor in is, Detroit lost this week to San Jose and Ottawa, who are ranked 32nd and 28th. It's one of those any given nights. And what's the one thing you hear, the one thing you hear John Tortorella say pretty much on a nightly basis every time they go into a game? What do you do? What do you do to combat McKinnon? What do you do to take care of this guy? What do you do for this thing? Right. It's play our game.
Right.
We got to play our game. That's all. Like, he doesn't talk about anybody else. He talks about, we got to, and in fairness, he might, after the fact, like when with McKinnon, he said the key was having somebody stay above him so he couldn't get to the net. And it happened one time and he scored on it.
Right.
He had some other looks earlier in the game. They did a pretty decent job of containing him as the game went on. Okay, you made an adjustment to him. You figured out a way to play with him.
There you go. Something teams couldn't do a couple years ago.
Along the way, by the way, and I'm not saying it didn't mean they had looks, but completely silencing otherwise Cale Makar and Mikko Rantanen, like that's a good team. You played a good team and a good roster, and you held them at bay.
You played a good game against a good team. So speaking of good games, I think that was a good game here. We wrap up as we head towards the wrap here of episode number 200. It's weird, man. If you had told me, January 1st, 2017 or whatever year we started this show, Mike and I started in his basement on two awful mics with no pop screens, that we would be here, 2023, about to head into 2024, 200 episodes deep. I wouldn't have believed you. So
I hear you.
And Kevin, you've been around for way more than half of it at this point, right? You were around before episode 100, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely before 100. I think I came in around 50-ish or something like that.
I think, you were right around 60.
The first run that you guys had was about 30,
35.
Right, was in that range. And then for a little while, like when you guys brought it back and it was picking back up and things like that, I wasn't on right away. basically I kind of had no choice. You guys threw me in as a regular member around the time that COVID hit, and it was like, okay, well now we got to just do like we need
gave you something to do.
But we had so much fun with those shows.
Let's talk brackets.
Sure, but let's talk brackets. The funny part is half the people we were talking about in those brackets work for the team now.
It's true. It's absolutely true. And it has been a really great couple of years. And we're going here. We don't have any plans of stopping anytime soon. The road to 300 starts next Sunday. It's as simple as that. So,
yep.
All right. I think that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you all for watching, listening, subscribing, liking, all of that stuff. I don't think we say thank you quite often enough. So thank you for checking out the show. Thank you for liking, subscribing, following, like I said. Share it with your friends. Let them know what we got going on here. Follow the show on social media at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. We'll be here. We're just putting out good Flyers news and good Flyers talk. And right now we're along for the ride. Is this the 2010 team? Who knows? We'll be back next week to talk a little bit more about it. And until then, see ya.